Some choices define a man's entire life. Daniel Hartwell understood this truth the way a cattleman understands weather. You read the signs, you make the call, you live with the consequences. At 70 years old, standing on the porch of the house he had built with his own hands 48 years ago, he could trace every good thing in his life back to one impossible afternoon in September 1878. The autumn wind carried the scent of pine and distant snow. Montana territory stretched before him in endless waves of grass and sky, the land he had carved from nothing into something that mattered. 15,000 acres, 3,000 head of prime cattle, a name that meant something in Sterling Ridge and beyond. But the house felt too quiet now, too empty. His boots made hollow sounds on the wooden planks as he walked to the railing. The sun hung low over the western mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Beautiful. His wife would have stopped whatever she was doing to watch a sunset like this, would have stood right here beside him, her hand finding his without words, both of them comfortable in the silence they had built together over 28 years. Gone now. 2 months buried on the hill behind the house beneath the pines she had planted herself back in 1880. The grief sat in his chest like a stone he would carry until his own grave opened to receive him. Behind him the door creaked, young footsteps uncertain. Daniel did not turn. He knew the sound of his grandson's walk, the particular hesitation of a boy trying to become a man too fast. "Grandpa." William's voice had deepened over the summer, but still cracked occasionally on certain words. 16 years old. Ah, knees. His father dead just months before his grandmother kicked in the head by a half-broke stallion while working the north pasture. The boy had lost both parents within a single year. Now he lived here learning to run the ranch that would be his someday if he proved strong enough to hold it. Daniel finally turned. The boy stood in the doorway, his shoulders broadening, but still carrying that raw bone thinness of youth. He had his father's face, which meant he had Daniel's face from 40 years ago. The same strong jaw, the same gray eyes that saw too much and said too little. "Mrs. Crawford came by earlier," William said, stepping onto the porch. His boots were new, still stiff, not yet broken in by the kind of work that shaped a man's feet into something harder than the leather that covered them. "While you were checking the south fence." Daniel waited. Helen Crawford did not make social calls without purpose. "She asked me," William stopped choosing his words carefully. "She asked me how you and Grandma met, how you knew she was the one." The wind picked up colder now. Daniel pulled his coat tighter and moved to the pair of wooden chairs he had built 30 years ago. Sat down with the careful slowness of old bones that had been broken and healed too many times. Gestured for the boy to take the other chair. William sat, waited. "What did Mrs. Crawford tell you?" Daniel asked. "She said," the boy hesitated. "She said you chose Grandma when nobody else would, that people thought you had lost your mind, that Grandma was old and plain and you could have had anyone." Daniel reached into his shirt pocket, found his pipe and tobacco pouch, packed the bowl with practiced efficiency, struck a match on the arm of his chair. The tobacco caught with a soft glow and he drew the smoke deep into his lungs before releasing it slowly into the evening air. "Helen Crawford knows the story," Daniel said. "Most of the town knows it. But knowing what happened is not the same as understanding why it happened, or what it meant." "Tell me," William said. "Simple. Direct." The boy was learning. "You asked how I knew she was the one." Daniel looked at his grandson. "That is the wrong question, son. I did not know, not at first. Love is not lightning from heaven revealing cosmic truth. Love is a decision you make every day for decades until the choosing becomes as natural as breathing." "But you must have felt something," William said, "when you first entered." Daniel smiled. The expression felt strange on his face, unused these past 2 months. "I felt nothing, nothing romantic anyway. She was plain. She was old by the standards of that time and place. She had been rejected 7 times before I ever laid eyes on her. 7 times William. 7 platforms where she stood alone while younger, prettier women got chosen. Most women would have given up after 2 or 3, but she kept trying. That is what caught my attention. Not her face, not her figure, her spine." The pipe had gone out. Daniel relit it, taking his time, letting the story gather itself in his mind, the way it had happened, not the way people told it afterward. "September 12th, 1878, he said. I was supposed to be in Sterling Ridge by noon for the bride platform. The Women's Settlement Society had been writing me letters for months, respectable women seeking honest marriage. I had ignored two previous platforms. But Robert, my foreman, he wore me down, said the ranch needed a woman's hand, said I was getting too set in my solitary ways after Elizabeth died. He paused, saying his first wife's name still carried weight even after all these years. I planned to arrive at noon, clean, presentable, ready to make a good impression. But that morning, three pregnant cows got themselves stuck in the marsh out by the North Creek. You know the one, still causes problems when the spring runoff is heavy. William nodded. He knew the place. Took me 2 hours to get them out, mud up to my knees, rope burns on my hands, horse fighting me the whole time because she could smell the fear on those cows. By the time I got the last one onto solid ground, I looked at the sun and knew I had maybe 15 minutes to make a 2-hour ride if I went back to the ranch to clean up first. The memory was sharp, clear. Daniel could still feel the mud drying on his skin, could still smell the stink of panicked cattle in his own sweat. Robert had sent word earlier, train got delayed by a washout, platform pushed to 3 in the afternoon. So I had time barely if I rode straight there without stopping. But I was covered in mud and cow shit. Not exactly how a man presents himself when he is shopping for a wife. So what did you do? William asked. I rode, Daniel said simply. Pushed that horse hard, got to Sterling Ridge at 2:45. Still filthy, still stinking. But I had made a promise to Robert, and I keep my word. The sun touched the mountains now. Soon it would be dark. When I got there, Daniel continued, the platform was nearly empty. Most of the women had already been chosen. Couples forming up, handling paperwork with Mrs. Pritchard. Only 3 women left standing alone. Martha Hodge, Ruth Weaver, and your grandmother. Daniel pulled smoke from his pipe, held it, released it slowly. Martha was angry. You could see it in the set of her jaw, the way she held her arms crossed over her chest like armor. That kind of anger poisons a marriage, son. Remember that. A woman who is angry at the world will eventually be angry at you no matter how well you treat her. Ruth was tired, a good woman, no doubt, a widow. But she looked like she had already survived more than any one person should have to survive, and she deserved peace, not more hard work. And Grandma? William asked softly. Daniel's throat tightened, even after 2 months saying certain things out loud, still cut. Your grandmother stood at the end of that platform with a carpet bag clutched between her hands. 31 years old, which might as well have been 60 in 1878. Plain face. No beauty that would turn heads. But she stood straight. Her hands did not shake. She was not crying, not praying, not making herself small, and hoping to be overlooked. She simply stood there, enduring because she had already endured 6 platforms before this one and had learned that begging changes nothing. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, pipe forgotten in his hand. I walked past Martha. I walked past Ruth. I stopped directly in front of your grandmother. And William, this is important. This is what you need to understand. I did not choose her despite her age. I did not choose her despite her plainness. I did not choose her despite the 7 rejections. I chose her because of those things. The boy frowned, not understanding. Most men want easy, Daniel said. They want young and pretty and soft. They want a woman who will make them feel like a hero for choosing her. But I had buried one wife already. Elizabeth was 18 when we married. Beautiful, sweet-natured. She came from Philadelphia, used to parties and fine dresses and a life that frontier Montana could never give her. The isolation broke her long before the childbirth killed her. The pipe had gone out again. Daniel did not bother to relight it. So when I looked at your grandmother that day, I was not looking for beauty. I was looking for strength. And a woman who has been knocked down 7 times and gets back up every single time, that is a woman who will not break when the hard seasons come. And son, the hard seasons always come. William was quiet for a long moment. Then, what did you say to her? I asked her name. She told me. Evelyn Brooks. I asked her age. She could have lied. Most women would have. But she looked me dead in the eye and said 31. The whole platform heard it. People gasped. 31 was ancient for a bride in those days. Daniel could still see her face, the way she had lifted her chin, slightly daring him to walk away like all the others had. I asked if she had been passed over that day. She said yes. I asked how many times before. She paused. I could see her deciding whether to tell the truth or try to hide it. She chose truth 6 times, 7 platforms total. What did you feel? William asked. Respect, Daniel said immediately. Pure respect. Because, son, most people quit after the second or third failure. They tell themselves they are not cut out for whatever they were trying to do. They find excuses. They blame circumstances. But your grandmother, she failed 6 times and tried a seventh. That is not desperation. That is iron wool wrapped in human skin. The stars were coming out now, the first few, the bright ones that always showed first. I asked her why she kept trying. She did not give me poetry. She did not cry and say she believed in love or fate or any of that nonsense. She looked at me and said, because the alternative is worse. 5 words, no drama, just brutal honesty about her circumstances. Daniel stood. His knees protested. He walked to the railing again, looking out at the land going dark. That is when I knew William. Right there. Not that I loved her. I did not. Not yet. But I knew she was what I needed. A partner. Someone who understood that life is hard, and sometimes the only choice is between hard and harder. Someone who would not collapse the first time drought killed half the herd, or winter froze 3 cowboys to death, or the bank called in loans we could barely pay. So you proposed right there, William asked. I told her what I was offering, a ranch, hard work, partnership, not decoration. I told her I needed someone with spine and sense, someone who would not fold when things got difficult. I did not promise love or romance or any of the things young girls dream about. I promised honesty, respect, and a chance to build something real. Daniel turned back to face his grandson. And William, here is the thing nobody tells you about marriage. The romantic part, the love part that comes later if you build it right. But you do not start with love. You start with respect. You start with honest assessment of what each person brings to the partnership. You start with clear eyes and realistic expectations. The love, if it comes, grows from that foundation. And the love that grows that way, it lasts. It survives things that would destroy marriages built on nothing but attraction and sentiment. Did the town think you were crazy? William asked. Absolutely. Daniel returned to his chair. People stared, whispered, questioned my judgment. Helen Crawford, she was the worst of them. She had been trying to match me with her niece Sarah for 2 years. Pretty girl, young, from a good family. When I chose your grandmother instead, Helen took it as a personal insult. Made life difficult for Evelyn all that first week. But that is a story for tomorrow. Why tomorrow? Because it is dark now and I am an old man who needs his rest. And because the story of how your grandmother and I built our marriage is not something to be rushed through in one evening. There are lessons in every part of it, and you need time to think about each piece before we move to the next. Daniel stood again. This time William stood with him. But Grandpa, the boy said, you still have not told me how you knew she was the one. Because I did not know, son. I made an educated guess. I gambled on character over beauty, on proven resilience over youthful hope. I bet that a woman who kept trying after 7 failures would be a woman who would stand beside me when everything went to hell. And I was right, but I did not know that day. I only knew it after 28 years of watching her prove it over and over again. They walked to the door together. Daniel put his hand on William's shoulder. Tomorrow I will tell you about the week of courtship, about the stampede that almost killed me 2 days after we met, about the blizzard that tested both of us, about the day your grandmother asked to see the ranch books and spotted errors I had missed, about Helen Crawford's attack at church and how I handled it, all of it. But tonight you need to sleep, and I need to sit with my memories a while longer. William nodded, started to go inside, stopped, turned back. Grandpa, do you miss her? Daniel's face, weathered by 70 years of Montana sun and wind, finally showed the grief he carried. Every breath, son, every single breath. The boy went inside. Daniel stood alone on the porch looking at the stars, remembering. September 12th, 1878, the day that changed everything. Daniel had been 42 years old that day, still in his prime or so he told himself, strong enough to work beside his hands from dawn until dusk. weathered by 15 years of building Triple Creek Ranch from 500 acres and 20 head of cattle into something that mattered. A widower for 4 years since Elizabeth and the baby died in the bedroom upstairs, both of them gone before the midwife could even send for the doctor. He had sworn after that he would never marry again. The pain of loss cut too deep. Safer to stay alone, safer to pour everything into the ranch and let the work fill the spaces where a wife and family should have been. But Robert Crawford, his foreman, and the closest thing Daniel had to a friend, kept pushing. Gently at first, then more insistently. The house needs a woman's touch, boss. You are getting too hard, too closed off. The men notice it. They worry. Daniel had ignored him for 2 years. Then in the spring of 1878, Robert made his strongest argument. The ranch is successful, but it could be more. You need someone managing supplies, keeping books, handling the household side while you handle the cattle and horses. A partner, not just a wife. Someone to build this thing with you. That argument had landed, because Robert was right. Elizabeth had tried to help with the household management, but she had been overwhelmed. 18 years old, raised in a city completely unprepared for frontier life. She had done her best, but her best had not been enough. The loneliness had eaten at her. The isolation. The endless work with no other women around, no society. Nothing but cattle and cowboys and Daniel himself, who worked too hard and talked too little. So when Robert suggested the bride platform, Daniel had considered it carefully, weighing the risks against the potential gains. A woman who chose frontier life knowingly, who understood what she was signing up for, who would be a partner in building something, not a delicate flower needing protection from reality. He had agreed to attend the September platform. Then on the morning of September 12th, those 3 damn cows got stuck in the marsh. Daniel could still remember the frustration. The mud sucking at his boots, the cows bellowing in panic, convinced they were about to die. His horse fighting the reins because horses hate the smell of fear, and those cows were broadcasting terror like a bell. The rope cutting into his palms as he pulled and cursed and finally got each animal onto solid ground. By the time he finished, the sun told him he had 15 minutes to make a 2-hour ride if he wanted to reach Sterling Ridge before the platform ended. He looked down at himself, mud caked on his pants up to the knees, his shirt soaked with sweat, hands bleeding from rope burns. He smelled like a man who had spent the morning wrestling panicked livestock through a marsh. For a moment, he considered turning back, going home, cleaning up, trying again at the next platform in October. But he had made a promise to Robert, and Daniel Hartwell kept his word. So he rode, pushed his horse harder than he should have, made the animal gallop when a canter would have been smarter, drove towards Sterling Ridge with single-minded determination, because once Daniel decided on a course of action, he followed it through. The town came into view at 2:30. He could see the platform from a quarter-mile away, set up in the center of town where Main Street widened into a kind of plaza. A crowd had gathered. Even from a distance, he could see the shapes of couples, forming men and women standing together, while Mrs. Pritchard, the coordinator from the Women's Settlement Society, handled paperwork. Daniel slowed his horse as he entered town. People turned to look. He saw recognition on their faces, saw their eyes widen as they took in his appearance. Daniel Hartwell, the richest rancher in 3 territories, arriving late and covered in filth. He did not care. Let them stare. He had not built Triple Creek Ranch by worrying about what people thought of his appearance. The platform stood in the center of the plaza, raised 4 feet off the ground so everyone could see. 13 women had arrived that morning, according to the notice Mrs. Pritchard had sent. 13 women hoping for marriage, for a fresh start, for a life that might be better than whatever they were leaving behind. As Daniel rode closer, he could see that most of the women were already paired off. Men and women standing together, talking quietly while Mrs. Pritchard made notes on her clipboard. Success stories in the making, or so everyone hoped. But 3 women stood alone, separated from the couples, unwanted, unchosen. Daniel stopped his horse 50 feet from the platform, studied the scene with the same careful assessment he used when evaluating cattle or horseflesh. Facts first, emotions later. The 3 women who remained, one was tall and angular, probably in her late 30s, with her arms crossed over her chest and a look on her face that could cut glass. One was older, maybe 45, a widow, based on the black dress, In the patient way, she stood like someone who had already survived worse than being passed over at a bride platform. And one was standing at position 12, clutching a worn carpet bag, back straight despite obvious exhaustion. That last one. Daniel felt something in his chest tighten as he looked at her. Not attraction, not pity, something else. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who had been hit hard by life but refused to stay down. He dismounted. The crowd had gone quiet now, everyone watching to see what Daniel Hartwell would do. He could feel their eyes, could practically hear their thoughts. What is he doing here? Why did he bother coming if he was going to arrive so late? Mrs. Pritchard approached, her face set in professional disapproval. She was 50 years old, gray-haired, with the kind of rigid posture that came from a lifetime of maintaining proper standards no matter what. Mr. Hartwell, she said, her voice tight, we have already completed the selection process. I am afraid that you telling me every woman here got chosen? Daniel interrupted. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. He had learned long ago that quiet authority carried more weight than shouting. Mrs. Pritchard's mouth thinned. She gestured at the three women standing alone. There are still some ladies available. However, given your standing in the community, I am certain we could arrange for a special selection from our next group. They will be arriving in... Do not need a special selection, Daniel said. He was already walking past her toward the platform. The crowd shifted. Whispers started. Daniel ignored them completely. His attention was on the three women. The tall, angry one watched him approach with narrowed eyes. The widow did not even look up. But the woman with the carpet bag met his gaze directly. Gray-green eyes, he noted. Steady, not hopeful exactly. More like resigned but still standing. Daniel walked past the angry woman, walked past the widow, stopped directly in front of the woman at position 12. The crowd had gone absolutely silent now. Daniel could smell soap on her. She had made an effort to present herself well despite whatever circumstances had brought her here. The dress was old but clean, carefully mended. Her hair was pinned up neatly, though a few strands had escaped in the heat. Name, he asked. Evelyn Brooks. Her voice was steady, lower than he had expected. Not a girl's voice, a woman's voice shaped by years and experience. Age. He saw her hesitate, saw her eyes flicker, weighing the choice between truth and survival. Then she lifted her chin slightly. 31. The crowd rippled, gasps, whispers turning into open exclamations. 31 old. Too old for the frontier where childbirth killed women regularly and men wanted young wives who could give them many children. Daniel did not react. He had expected something like this. A woman standing alone at position 12, passed over by every man who had come before him, was not going to be young and beautiful. You have been passed over today, he asked. Yes. How many times before this? Longer pause now. She was measuring him, trying to decide how much truth he could handle. Daniel waited. Patience was a skill he had learned from working with horses and cattle. You did not rush an animal that was deciding whether to trust you. 6, she said finally. 7 times, 7 platforms. 7 times standing in front of men and being found wanting. Daniel felt his respect for this woman deepen. Most people would have quit after 2 or 3 failures, would have told themselves this was not meant to be, would have found some other way to survive. But she had kept trying. You keep trying anyway, he said. It was not a question. I keep trying. Why? She looked at him for a long moment. Really looked like she was trying to see past his muddy clothes and trail dust to the man underneath. Then she spoke, and her answer was the most honest thing Daniel had heard in years. Because the alternative is worse. There it was. No romance, no pretty vows about believing in fate or love conquering all. Just brutal honesty about her circumstances. She was 31, unwanted, running out of options. The alternative to keeping trying was poverty, dependence, slow starvation of hope and dignity. Daniel respected that honesty more than any sweet words could have earned. You cook, he asked. Yes. Clean sew, keep a house. Yes. Read and write. Yes, I was a school teacher before, she stopped, before what he would learn later. For now, it was enough to know she was educated. Daniel stepped back slightly, raised his voice so the whole platform could hear. I got a ranch 15 miles north of here, biggest spread in the valley, 15,000 acres, good water, cattle and horses. It is hard work. I need a partner, not a decoration. Someone with spine and sense. Someone who will not fold the first time things get difficult. He lowered his voice again just for her. I am not looking for a girl who needs protecting from reality. I am looking for a woman who has already survived it. You understand the difference? Yes, Evelyn whispered. I am 42 years old, widower. Wife died 4 years back in childbirth. Baby with her. I got a house that needs a woman's touch and a life that needs sharing. I work hard. I drink occasionally, but not to excess. I keep my word once given. I would expect the same from a wife. Daniel saw her hands tighten on the carpet bag, saw her throat work as she swallowed. This was happening fast. He knew that. But frontier life did not allow for long courtships. You made decisions and lived with them in them. Evelyn Brooks, he said clearly, would you be willing to court with the intention of marriage? The platform exploded into noise, shocked gasps, exclamations. Someone said, but she is, and someone else shushed them violently. Daniel ignored all of it. His eyes stayed locked on Evelyn's face. She studied him. 5 seconds, 10. It felt like an hour. Then she spoke and her voice carried across the sudden silence. Yes, I would be willing to court. Daniel nodded once, turned to Mrs. Pritchard, who looked faintly stunned. What is the proper procedure? He asked. There is a week of supervised courtship, separate accommodations naturally, chaperoned meetings to determine compatibility. If both parties agree at the end of the week, marriage can proceed with the society's blessing. Fine, where is she staying? The society maintains rooms at Mrs. Brennan's boarding house. Daniel pulled out his wallet, counted bills with the ease of a man for whom money was a tool, not a worry, handed them to Mrs. Pritchard. 1 week, that enough? More than sufficient, Mr. Hartwell. He turned back to Evelyn. I will call on you tomorrow morning at 9. We will talk properly then. That acceptable? Yes. Good. Daniel touched the brim of his hat, a gesture that acknowledged her as worthy of courtesy, then walked back to his horse. The crowd parted for him automatically. People who had been whispering went quiet as he passed. Daniel did not look at any of them, did not care what they thought. He had made his choice, and he would stand by it. He mounted his horse, wheeled the animal around, and rode out of Sterling Ridge, the same way he had come in, leaving chaos in his wake. Behind him, the platform erupted into conversation. Speculation, disbelief, judgment. Let them talk. Daniel had work to do. The ride back to Triple Creek Ranch took 2 hours. Time enough to think about what he had just done, what he had just committed to. A week of courtship. Then if Evelyn Brooks proved to be what she appeared to be, a marriage, a partnership. The sun was setting by the time Daniel reached the ranch. Robert was waiting in the yard, obviously having heard the news already. In a town the size of Sterling Ridge, gossip traveled faster than horses. Well, Robert asked as Daniel dismounted. I chose one. Young, pretty, Heswau. 31, plain, been rejected 7 times. Robert stared for a moment. Then a slow grin spread across his weathered face. You magnificent son of a bitch. You went and picked the fighter. I picked competence over beauty, Daniel said. Youth fades. Pretty fades. But a woman with spine, that is rare. And rare is valuable. Helen is going to have opinions, Robert warned. Helen can keep her opinions to herself. This is my choice, not hers. Robert laughed. This is going to be interesting, boss. That night, Daniel stood on the porch of his house looking out at the land he had built. The same porch where 28 years later, he would stand with his grandson and tell this story. He did not know that night in 1878 how it would turn out. Did not know if Evelyn Brooks would prove to be the partner he needed, or if this gamble would fail, like so many others. All he knew was that she had stood on 7 platforms and kept trying. That was enough. For now, it was enough. The next evening, as the sun dropped behind the western mountains, Daniel found William waiting for him on the porch again. The boy had finished his work for the day, horses fed and watered, stalls mucked out, the endless cycle of ranch work that built muscle and character in equal measure. Daniel settled into his chair with a grunt. His knees had been giving him trouble all day. 70 years of hard living left marks on a man's body that no amount of rest could erase. You ready for the rest of the story? Daniel asked. William nodded, pulling his coat tighter against the evening chill. October in Montana territory meant cold nights, even when the days stayed warm. Winter was coming, always coming. Day one of courtship, Daniel said. I arrived at Mrs. Brennan's boarding house at 9 in the morning, bathed, clean clothes, hat in my hands, ready to present myself properly. He paused, remembering. The memory was sharp despite the decades. Some moments brand themselves into a man's mind so deeply that age cannot touch them. Your grandmother opened the door wearing that gray dress, modest, mended carefully, clean as she could make it. And the first thing she said was, "Not good morning. It was not how nice to see you." She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Mr. Hartwell, before we proceed, I need to understand what you actually expect from a wife." William leaned forward. "That is direct." "That is your grandmother," Daniel said. "No games, no flirting. She treated our courtship like a business negotiation because that is what it was. Two practical people assessing whether they could build something together." Daniel relit his pipe, the tobacco glowing softly in the gathering dusk. We sat in Mrs. Brennan's parlor. She was there too, of course, chaperoning, watching everything, making sure nothing improper happened. And your grandmother proceeded to interview me like I was applying for a position. What did she ask? She asked me to define partnerships specifically, not in general terms. She wanted details. What would her responsibilities be? What authority would she have? How would decisions get made? What happened if we disagreed? Daniel smiled at the memory. Most women would have tried to charm me, would have fluttered eyelashes and acted sweet and demure. Your grandmother treated it like she was negotiating a contract. And William, I respected that more than any amount of feminine wiles could have earned. The wind picked up. Daniel drew his coat tighter. I told her the truth, all of it. The ranch employed 30 men year-round, more during roundup and branding. Those men needed feeding 3 times a day, medical care when they got injured, and they got injured regularly, supplies ordered, books kept, disputes settled. It was a full-time job managing the household side of the operation. Did you tell her about Elizabeth? William asked quietly. Daniel's expression went hard. I did, and that is where the story gets important, son. Pay attention to this part. He set his pipe aside, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Your grandmother asked me directly. She said, Elizabeth, your first wife, she managed all that. And I had a choice right there. I could lie. Could paint Elizabeth as this perfect frontier wife who handled everything beautifully until tragedy struck. Make myself look good. Make Elizabeth look good. Keep everything nice and simple. But you told the truth, William said. I told the truth. I said no. Elizabeth tried, but she found it overwhelming. She was 18 when we married, raised in Philadelphia, came out here expecting one thing and found something completely different. The frontier life broke her spirit before it killed her body. Daniel's voice had gone rough. Even after all these years, talking about Elizabeth's death carried weight. And then I told your grandmother something I had never said out loud to anyone. I said I failed Elizabeth. I expected her to adapt without preparing her. I did not teach her what she needed to know. I did not understand how lonely she was until it was too late. I will not make that mistake twice. The silence stretched. William waited. That is when your grandmother leaned forward and said something that changed everything. She said, so you are not looking for someone to replace Elizabeth. You are looking for someone you can actually partner with. Someone prepared for what this life demands. Daniel nodded slowly. Exactly. And she understood that distinction immediately. That is when I knew her mind was sharp. She was not thinking about romance or comparing herself to a dead woman. She was thinking about the practical reality of what I was offering and what I needed. What did she say? She asked what I offered in return, no hesitation. She wanted to know what she would get out of this arrangement, and I told her. Security, respect, a home, purpose, honest partnership where her voice mattered. I told her I would make final decisions on ranch business, but I would listen to counsel, that I did not drink to excess, did not gamble, did not run around with saloon girls, that I worked hard and expected the same from a partner. Daniel picked up his pipe again, found it had gone out, did not bother to relight it. And then she asked the question that mattered most. She said no love, just like that, direct, wanting to know if I was promising romantic feelings. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. I said, if love comes, it comes. I will not promise what I cannot guarantee, but I will promise respect, honesty, and loyalty. Some would say that is a better foundation than romantic love that fades when life gets hard. William absorbed this, and she agreed. She agreed. She said she had stopped believing in romance 7 platforms ago, that what I was offering, honest partnership with a practical man, was better than any fantasy. Then we shook hands. Like business partners, sealed the deal. The last light was fading from the sky, stars beginning to show. Mrs. Brennan suggested a walk, said if we were going to continue talking, we should do it properly. With supervision, of course. So we walked Main Street with Mrs. Brennan trailing 10 paces behind, and every single person we passed stopped to stare. Daniel's jaw tightened at the memory. Your grandmother felt their eyes. I could feel her hand tighten on my arm, but she kept her chin up, kept her back straight, refused to show them the discomfort I know she felt. What did people say? Whispers, always whispers. There goes Daniel Hartwell with that woman he chose. The old one. What was he thinking could have had anyone? Why would he pick her on and on? Small town gossip. I told her to ignore them. Told her they would find something else to talk about by next week. William frowned. But it bothered you. It bothered me because it showed disrespect. Not to me. To her. And William, this is important. This is something you need to understand about being a man. Daniel fixed his grandson with a hard stare. When you make a choice publicly, you stand by it. You defend it. Because any attack on your choice is an attack on your judgment. If people think your judgment is unsound, they will not trust anything else you do. Your business decisions. Your leadership. Nothing. So you draw the line early and you draw it hard. That is what I did. At the church, William asked. We will get there, Daniel said. First, the ranch visit. Day 2. That is when things got interesting. He stood bones creaking, walked to the railing. The ranch spread out before him in darkness, only the lights from the bunkhouse visible in the distance. I brought your grandmother to Triple Creek, planned a nice gentle tour, show her the house, introduce her to Dutch, explain how everything worked. But life had other plans. Daniel turned back to face William. We were riding toward the ranch about a mile out when I heard it. That sound every cattleman dreads. Thunder that does not come from the sky. The ground shaking. 300 head of cattle running blind with fear. William sat up straighter. Stampede. Stampede. And they were running straight toward the ravine on the north side. If they went over that edge, I would lose $15,000 in cattle. Enough to cripple the ranch for years. Daniel could still feel the spike of adrenaline that had shot through him that day. No time to explain, no time to plan. I turned to your grandmother and asked if she could ride hard. She had been out of practice, I knew that, but there was no choice. She hesitated for maybe 1 second. Then she said yes. What did you tell her? I told her to follow me, stay behind, stay safe. If things got dangerous, turn around and ride back to town. Then I kicked my horse into a gallop and rode toward 300 panicked cattle like my life depended on it. Because in a way it did. Daniel sat back down. The memory was vivid, sharp, the kind of moment that defines what a person is made of. I caught up to the leading edge of the stampede, positioned myself at an angle, fired my pistol into the air. Sharp crack to startle them without panicking them more, shouting, waving my hat, trying to turn the lead animals away from the ravine. He paused. One bull massive thing, 2,000 pounds, with horns like spears, he turned the wrong direction. Came straight at me. My horse reared. I held steady, fired again. The bull turned at the last second, missed me by maybe 3 feet. William's eyes were wide. Robert appeared from the other side. He had heard the stampede too. Together we managed to curve the leading animals. The rest followed at D's. The whole mass of them gradually slowing, turning into a circle, finally stopping about 200 yards from the ravine edge. Daniel's hands resting on the arms of his chair were not quite steady. Even after 28 years, the memory carried an edge of fear. When it was over, when the cattle had settled and we were checking for injuries, I turned to look for your grandmother. She was sitting on her horse exactly where I had told her to stay. 100 yards back, far enough to be safe. Her face was pale, but she had not screamed, had not panicked, had not ridden off. She just watched and waited. What did you say to her, Bo? I rode back, asked if she was hurt. She said no, and asked if I was hurt. I said no. Then she asked if that happened often. And William, I will never forget this. I told her it happened often enough. Asked if she was scared. She paused, looked me right in the eye, and said terrified. But I stayed. Daniel's throat was tight. That is when I knew. Not when she stood on the platform being brave, not when she asked intelligent questions about partnership, but when she faced actual danger and chose to stay anyway. Anyone can be brave when there is no cost. Being brave when you are terrified, that is character. William nodded slowly, understanding. After the stampede settled, I brought her to the ranch proper. The hands gathered around, 30 cowboys curious and skeptical, some openly dismissive. They had heard their boss chose an old woman. They wanted to see what kind of fool decision I had made. Daniel smiled slightly. Dutch approached first. You remember Dutch? The cook who died when I was 8, William said. He was mean. He was not mean. He was demanding. Big difference. Dutch walked right up to your grandmother and asked if she could cook. She said yes. He asked for how many. She told him she had fed church suppers of 50 people, had cooked daily for her father's boarding house, 20 guests every day for 3 years. What did Dutch say? He said, prove it. Told her to make biscuits for 30 men. Said if they were passable, we would talk. So your grandmother spent 2 hours in the ranch kitchen while I handled stampede paperwork. She made 4 dozen biscuits. When the hands came in for lunch, Dutch served them without comment. Daniel's smile widened slightly. First bite silence. Then one cowboy said they were the best biscuits he had eaten in 5 years. Another asked if Dutch was going to let her keep making them. Dutch tried to hide his approval, just grunted and said maybe if she stuck around. Did that win them over? It started the process, but what really won them over was what happened next. Your grandmother came out of the kitchen, flour on her dress, sweat on her forehead, but standing straight. She looked at me and asked if she had passed the test. I told her she had, with distinction. And then without waiting for praise or approval, she went back into the kitchen and started learning the inventory system from Dutch. Daniel leaned back in his chair. That is when the hands understood. She was not there to win their approval. She was there to do a job. Competence without needing validation. That impressed them more than perfect biscuits ever could. The night had gone fully dark now, cold seeping in. By day 5, we had established a routine, morning meetings to discuss the day's work. She would sit in and listen, learning the rhythms of ranch management. Afternoons she spent with Dutch mastering the kitchen and supply systems. Evenings we would sit in the ranch office, and I would explain the books to her, show her how we tracked expenses and income, how we planned for lean years. Daniel paused, and that is when she asked to see everything. All of it, every ledger, every debt, every asset. She said if she was going to be a partner, she needed to understand the business completely. Did you show her? I did, laid it all out. Spent 3 hours going through numbers with her. She asked smart questions, pointed out inefficiencies I had not noticed. And then right at the end, she spotted 2 errors in my accounting. Math mistakes I had made and carried forward for months. Daniel shook his head, the memory still sharp. That is when I knew she was not just a survivor. She was an asset, and son that makes all the difference in a marriage. Your partner should make you better, should see things you miss, should challenge you to improve. Your grandmother did that from day 1. William was quiet for a moment, then, you said something happened at church with Mrs. Crawford. Daniel's expression hardened. Day 5 was Sunday, church service, entire town gathered, and Helen Crawford had been simmering all week. She saw my choice of Evelyn as a personal insult. She had been trying to match me with her niece Sarah for 2 years. When I chose your grandmother instead, Helen could not let it go. He stood again, restless with the memory. We entered the church together. Every head turned. Whispers started immediately. Your grandmother's hand tightened on my arm. I could feel her tension, but she kept her chin up, kept her back straight. We walked to our pew like she belonged there, because she did. What happened after the service? Community dinner. Under the oak trees, everyone gathered, and Helen approached. She was beautiful, Helen. 40 years old, expensive dress, every inch the wealthy rancher's wife. But there was something cruel in her eyes that day. Robert had warned me, said Helen could not stand being thwarted. Daniel's hands clenched on the porch railing. Helen walked right up to us, in front of everyone, said she wanted a word about my interesting choice. The whole gathering went quiet. This was the spectacle they had been waiting for. What did she say? She said she was simply curious that we had had such lovely young women hoping for my attention. And then I chose well, it was unexpected. Her eyes raked over your grandmother like she was evaluating livestock. Dismissive, cruel, deliberate. Daniel turned to face William. Your grandmother started to respond, but I stepped forward, placed myself between them, and I said something I had been preparing to say since the moment I made my choice. William waited. I told Helen I chose a woman, not a girl playing at frontier life. I chose someone with spine enough to build a real partnership, someone who would not fold when times got hard. And then I told her that if that was unexpected, it said more about her understanding of marriage than it did about my judgment. Did she back down? No, she tried to say she did not mean to imply anything, so I made it crystal clear. I raised my voice enough for the whole gathering to hear. I said any disrespect to Evelyn would be taken as disrespect to me, that she was going to be my wife, which made her one of the most important women in the territory, that people would treat her accordingly. Daniel's voice had gone hard with the memory. And then I told Helen and Robert both that if they could not show proper respect, they would find themselves looking for employment elsewhere. William's eyes widened. You threatened to fire them. I did, because Helen's disrespect was not just an insult to your grandmother. It was a challenge to my authority. If people thought they could question my judgment openly, they would question everything. My business decisions, my leadership, all of it. I had to draw the line hard and early. What happened? Helen went white, turned and fled. The whole gathering stood in shocked silence. Then I turned to everyone else and asked if anyone else had opinions about my choice they wanted to share. Nobody spoke. So I took your grandmother's arm and we went to eat dinner. Daniel sat back down heavily. Robert approached me later, said I did not have to threaten his job. I told him yes, I did, that I had made my choice publicly and I would defend it publicly. That was the only way to establish that your grandmother was under my protection. Frontier has a code, William. Attacks on a man's family are attacks on the man himself. I drew that line clear. Did Grandma understand? She confronted me that evening, said I did not have to threaten Robert's job just to defend her. I told her this was not just about defending her, it was about establishing boundaries, about making clear that she carried my name and my protection came with that name. Daniel's expression softened slightly. She studied me for a long moment. Then she said it was unexpectedly reassuring, knowing I would stand firm. I told her I would always stand firm, that anyone who hurt her would answer to me. And William, I meant it, every word. The wind had picked up colder now. Winter promising its arrival. Day 7 was proposal night. Robert and Helen invited us for dinner. Helen had apologized privately. Robert arranged the dinner to show support. After we ate, they gave us privacy in the parlor. Daniel's voice went quiet. I pulled out the ring I had bought. Simple gold band with a small sapphire. Nothing fancy, practical, durable. Then I told your grandmother something I needed her to understand before I asked properly. What did you tell her? I told her I was not offering an easy life. The Triple Creek Ranch was successful, but it took constant work to keep it that way. That she would work harder as my wife than she ever worked as a teacher. That she would face winter storms and summer droughts and cattle disease and market crashes. That she would manage 30 rough men and deal with town gossip and Helen Crawford's opinions for the rest of her life. Daniel paused, and I told her I was not offering great romance. That I was 42 years old, set in my ways, emotionally scarred from losing Elizabeth. That I did not write poetry or give flowers without occasion. That I showed affection through providing and protecting and keeping my word. Why tell her that? Because she needed to know exactly what she was agreeing to. No illusions, no false promises, just brutal honesty about what our life together would be. Daniel's hands resting on the chair arms tightened slightly. Then I asked what I was offering, and I told her. security, respect, partnership, a chance to build something meaningful. And I said if she was looking for a fairy tale, she should say no right then, and we would part cordially. What did she say? She said she stopped believing in fairy tales 7 platforms ago. That what I was offering, honest partnership with a practical man, was better than any fantasy. That she did not need poetry. She needed stability and purpose and respect. And I had shown her all 3 that week. Daniel stood slowly, walked to the door, put his hand on the frame. Then I got down on one knee, as formal as I knew how, and I asked Evelyn Brooks if she would do me the honor of becoming my wife, my partner, and co-builder of the life we could make at Triple Creek Ranch. His voice was rough now, raw with the memory. She smiled, first genuine smile I had seen from her, and she said yes. Yes, Daniel Hartwell will marry you. The silence stretched. William did not interrupt. I slipped the ring on her finger. Then I kissed her. First real kiss. Chaste but carrying the weight of commitment, the weight of a promise being made. Daniel turned back to face his grandson. We married 2 days later, October 1878. Simple ceremony, 20 people, no fuss. Just vows spoken and a partnership begun. Did you love her then? William asked quietly. Daniel was silent for a long moment. No, not then. I respected her. I valued her. I believed we could build something good together. But love, real love, that came later. When tomorrow, Daniel said, tomorrow I will tell you about the blizzard, about the 5 men trapped in a line shack 15 miles north with a storm that should have killed all of us. About your grandmother riding into that storm because 5 men needed medical care, and she refused to let danger be an excuse to abandon people who depended on us. He moved toward the door. That is when partnership became something deeper. When I started to understand what it meant to have someone beside you who would not quit no matter how hard things got. That is when respect started becoming love. William stood. Grandpa, did she know that you did not love her yet? Daniel paused in the doorway. She knew. We were both going into this with clear eyes, no romantic illusions, just 2 practical people making a calculated gamble on each other. The love came later, but the foundation we built that week, the honesty and respect and partnership, that made the love possible. That made it last. He looked at his grandson. Remember that, William, when you find someone worth building a life with. Start with respect. Start with honesty. Start with partnership. The love that grows from that foundation will survive anything. The love that starts with nothing but attraction and sentiment that breaks the first time life gets hard. Daniel went inside, leaving William alone with the darkness and the cold wind and the weight of lessons being learned. Inside, Daniel poured himself a whiskey, sat in his chair by the fire, looked at the photograph of Evelyn on the mantle taken 10 years ago when photography finally came to Montana. Telling him our story, Ev, he said quietly to the empty room, trying to teach him what you and I learned the hard way, that marriage is not about finding the perfect person. It is about becoming the right person for someone else. The fire crackled. The house settled. Daniel sipped his whiskey and remembered. Tomorrow he would tell William about the blizzard, about the moment when partnership truly became love, even if he had been too stubborn to say the words for another 15 years after that. Tomorrow. But tonight he would sit with his memories and his grief and the ghost of the woman who had stood on 7 platforms and refused to quit. The woman who had changed everything. The woman who had been worth choosing. 2 nights later, William found his grandfather in the barn. Daniel was checking on a mare that had been limping earlier in the day. The lamplight cast long shadows across the stalls, and the smell of hay and horse and leather filled the air. Grandpa, William said quietly, not wanting to startle the animal. Daniel looked up from examining the mare's left foreleg. She will be fine, just a stone bruise. Keep her off hard ground for a week. He straightened slowly, one hand on his lower back. You ready for more of the story? Yes, sir. They walked back to the house together, boots crunching on the frost that had settled with the evening. Inside, Daniel poured 2 fingers of whiskey for himself, hot tea for William. They settled into their chairs by the fire. Your grandmother and I married on October 14th, 1878, Daniel began, 2 days after I proposed. Simple ceremony at the church. 20 people. Reverend Matthew said the words. We spoke our vows. Robert and Helen stood as witnesses. Then it was done. Evelyn Brooks became Evelyn Hartwell. He sipped his whiskey, letting the burns settle in his chest. We spent our wedding night at the ranch. No honeymoon. Cattle do not care if you just got married. Work continues whether you want it to or not. That is frontier life in 3 words. Work continues regardless. William shifted in his chair. Was it strange being married to someone you barely knew? Strange is not the right word. It was careful. We were both careful with each other. Respectful. She was nervous. I could see it in the way her hands shook when she unpinned her hair that first night. I was nervous too, though I tried not to show it. 42 years old, and I felt like a boy again, uncertain of what to do or say. Daniel stared into the fire. I will not discuss the intimate details. That is between a husband and wife, but I will say this. We were gentle with each other, patient, honest about what we wanted and what made us uncomfortable. That is all anyone needs to know. Respect matters more than passion, especially at the beginning. The fire crackled. William waited. The first months of marriage were about learning rhythms. Your grandmother woke at 5 in the morning, same as me. She managed breakfast for 30 men, kept the household accounts, treated injuries when the hands got hurt, and they got hurt regularly. Settled disputes. By Christmas, she had reorganized the entire supply system, saved the ranch $800 in wastage. Daniel smiled slightly. I taught her to ride properly, taught her to shoot because frontier wives need to defend themselves if trouble comes, taught her the economics of ranching. She taught me patience, taught me to listen instead of just solving problems. She had a way of seeing angles I missed. Like what? January 1879, a hand named Jake Carson got caught stealing cattle. Clear evidence. My first instinct was to fire him and report him to the marshal. Simple. Direct. But your grandmother asked me why he was stealing. I told her it did not matter. Theft is theft. She said it mattered if he was desperate versus malicious. Turned out she had been paying attention to the hands. Had seen Jake writing letters and asked about them. He was sending money to his widowed sister back east. Woman had 3 kids and no income. Jake was stupid, not evil. Daniel set down his glass. Your grandmother suggested we dock his pay to repay the stolen cattle value. Give him extra work so he could earn bonuses to help his sister. He would learn his lesson without destroying his family. I implemented her solution. Jake became the most loyal hand on this ranch for the next 20 years. Died in 1809 still working for us. Left everything he had to his sister's children. That was smart, William said. That was your grandmother understanding that people are not just good or bad. They are complicated. They make mistakes under pressure. Sometimes mercy builds more loyalty than punishment. I learned that from her. Learned to see situations from more angles before making final decisions. Daniel leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. But partnership is easy when life is smooth. Real partnership gets tested when crisis hits. And William, the crisis that tested us came in February 1879, 4 months after we married. The worst blizzard I have seen in my 70 years on this earth. The wind outside picked up as if responding to the memory. Daniel stood, walked to the window, looked out at the darkness. Started mid-morning on February 8th. Snow coming down so thick you could not see 10 feet. By noon, drifts were waist-high. By evening, the temperature had dropped to 20 below zero, and we had no word from the North Line shack. 5 men trapped there, 15 miles away in conditions that could kill a man in an hour if he was not prepared. Daniel turned back to face William. Morning of February 9th, the storm had lessened enough to ride. Robert and I planned to go get those men, but your grandmother said she was coming too. With the white mirrors. Because 5 men trapped meant 5 men likely suffering from frostbite or hypothermia. Dutch could not handle medical care that complex. She said we needed a medic. I said it was too dangerous. She said, since when had danger been an excuse to abandon people who depended on us? Daniel's expression was hard with the memory. We argued. I told her no. She told me I was being stupid. Robert finally broke the stalemate, said she was right. We needed medical capability, that she had proven herself capable, that we should let her come. He returned to his chair. So we rode out at dawn, 6 people, me, Robert, your grandmother Dutch, and 2 cowboys, extra horses carrying supplies and medical equipment. 15 miles in blizzard conditions. William, that ride took 6 hours. 6 hours of brutal cold, wind cutting like knives, snowdrifts we had to dismount and dig through, horses struggling, and your grandmother kept up the entire way, never complained, never asked to turn back, just followed where we led. The fire had burned down. Daniel added another log, watching the flames catch and spread. 10 miles in, we found Pete Morrison, 23 years old, had been with us only 3 months. Found him frozen solid against a tree. Must have tried to walk out when the storm hit. Died maybe 100 yards from shelter if he had just known which direction to go. William made a soft sound. Daniel nodded. Your grandmother dismounted, checked him even though it was obvious he was dead. Then she pulled off her own scarf and wrapped it around his head. Sign of respect for the dead. Moment of silence. Then she remounted without a word, and we kept riding. Was she upset? She was grieving. I could see it in her eyes. But she did not fall apart, did not go hysterical. She treated it with practical sorrow. Mourn but keep moving because 4 other men were still alive and needed help. That is when I started to understand what I had married. Not a delicate flower, a woman with spine made of steel. Daniel's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. We reached the line shack at mile 12. Part of the roof had collapsed, no smoke from the chimney. I kicked the door open. Inside, we found 4 men alive but in bad shape. Hypothermic. And old Tom Brennan was dead in the corner. Frozen, 58 years old. Had worked for me for 12 years. The room was quiet except for the crackling fire. Your grandmother moved like a battlefield nurse, checking pulses, examining extremities for frostbite, prioritizing care without hesitation. 2 men had mild hypothermia. They would recover. 1 man had severe frostbite on both feet, might lose toes. 4th man had pneumonia developing. Critical. Daniel's voice had gone flat, reciting facts to keep emotion at bay. We got a fire going, started warming them gradually. You cannot warm hypothermia victims too fast or you will kill them. Your grandmother knew that, knew exactly what to do. Fed them warm broth, wrapped them in blankets, monitored their breathing and pulse. She worked for 2 hours straight without stopping. Did they all survive? We had to wait 2 more days for the storm to break and enough to travel. Cramped in that line shack with 7 people alive and 2 corpses in the corner covered respectfully with blankets. Rationing food, keeping the fire going. Your grandmother tended the sick man every 2 hours, kept him breathing when his lungs wanted to give up. Daniel stared into the fire. Night 2 in that shack, everyone else was sleeping. Your grandmother and I were both awake. She was checking on the pneumonia victim. I was watching her work, and I said something I had been thinking since the stampede. I told her she had done good that day. She said so had I. I told her this was what life would be like. Crisis, death, danger. It did not get easier. He paused. She looked at me and said she did not marry me expecting easy. She married me expecting partnership and facing hard things. She said this taking care of dying cowboys in a collapsed line shack during a blizzard, this was exactly what she signed up for. Daniel's throat worked. That is when something shifted in my chest, William. Not love yet, but the foundation of love being laid, brick by brick by brick. The silence stretched. Then William asked quietly, did everyone survive the trip back? We got back to the ranch on February 12th. Lost Pete and old Tom. The 4 we saved all lived. Man with frostbite lost 3 toes but kept his feet. Man with pneumonia survived because your grandmother sat with him for 4 days and refused to let him die. Daniel's voice was rough now. Town heard about it, about Evelyn riding into a blizzard to save 5 cowboys, about her tending injured men in a collapsed shack for 3 days. That earned respect faster than months of perfect household management ever could. Helen Crawford came to the ranch a week later, brought supplies, apologized directly to your grandmother, said she had been wrong, that Evelyn was exactly what I needed. So that is when you fell in love with her, William said. Daniel shook his head slowly. That is when I realized I could not imagine life without her. Whether that was love or just deep partnership, I was not sure. But son, I need to tell you something now, something I have never told anyone except your father. He walked to the window again, looking out at nothing. 10 months after we married, your grandmother told me she was pregnant. William went very still. Daniel's reflection in the dark window showed a face carved by grief. I felt terror and joy mixed together. Terror because Elizabeth had died in childbirth. Joy because this meant a future, a legacy, someone to pass the ranch to. Your grandmother glowed. She was careful, followed every instruction the doctor gave. But she was happy, William, truly happy for the first time since I had known her. The wind howled outside. She miscarried at 5 months, baby boy. We buried him on the hill behind the house, right next to where your grandmother rests now. William's voice was barely a whisper. I did not know. Nobody knew except Robert and Helen. We kept it private, but William, that loss did something to us. Grief shared and survived together bonds people deeper than any romance ever could. We cried together. We held each other through the worst nights. We made promises to each other in the darkness about never giving up, about standing together no matter what. Daniel turned from the window. She tried again. Got pregnant 3 more times over the next 5 years. Miscarried all 3. The doctor said scar tissue from the first loss made it impossible for her to carry to term. After the 4th loss, we stopped trying. Accepted we would have no children of our own. He sat back down heavily. That is when we learned your father and his wife were expecting. 1889. Your father was our only hope for legacy. And when you were born in 1890, William, your grandmother, held you like you were the most precious thing on earth. Because you were. You were the grandson she could hold when she could not hold the children we lost. I am sorry, Grandpa. Do not be sorry. Be grateful. Because that tragedy forged us into something unbreakable. We survived the worst thing that could happen to a married couple. Survived it together. And we came out stronger. Daniel picked up his glass, found it empty, did not refill it. But I still had not told her I loved her. We loved each other. I know that now. We showed it every day through actions, through standing together in crisis, through building this life. But saying the words out loud, that took me 15 more years. William leaned forward. 15 years. Why so long? Because saying it meant admitting she could destroy me if she left or died. After losing Elizabeth, after losing 4 babies, I had sworn I would never feel that vulnerable again. Keeping the words inside felt safer. Like if I did not say them, maybe the loss would hurt less if it came. What changed? Daniel's hands shook slightly as he set down the empty glass. October 1893, 15 years into our marriage. Your grandmother got pneumonia. Bad. 3 days of fever where I thought I would lose her. I sat beside her bed for 72 hours straight. Did not sleep. Did not eat. Just held her hand and talked to her because the doctor said hearing my voice might keep her grounded. His voice cracked. I told her everything I had never said. Told her about choosing her on that platform. About respecting her before I loved her. About how she had made me a better man. And I told her I loved her. Told her I had loved her for years, but was too stubborn and too scared to say it out loud. Did she hear you? She was delirious with fever. I thought she could not hear anything. But when she finally woke up clear-headed, for the first time in days, the first thing she said was that she had heard me, asked if I meant it or if it was fever dreams. Daniel's eyes were wet now. I told her it was truth, that I loved her, had loved her since that blizzard in 1879 probably. Maybe before, that I had just been too afraid to say it because saying it meant admitting I could not survive losing her. What did she say? She told me she had loved me since the moment I stood in front of Helen Crawford and defended her like she was worth defending, since I taught her to shoot, since I held her through the miscarriages, since I built a school on ranch property because I knew she missed teaching. She said she had loved me for years but thought I did not want the words, that I showed love through actions instead. Daniel wiped his face roughly. I told her actions did matter more than words, but sometimes words mattered too. So I said them. I told her I loved her, that she was the finest thing that ever happened to me, that I would love her until my last breath and beyond. The fire had burned low again. Neither of them moved to add wood. After that, William life got easier somehow. Not the circumstances. We still faced droughts and market crashes and injuries and disease, but facing them together knowing we loved each other that made every crisis manageable. Daniel stood, walked to the mantel, picked up the photograph of Evelyn, stared at it for a long moment. 1895, she opened a school on ranch property, 8 students first year, 20 by year 5. Taught during mornings, managed household afternoons. I supported it fully, donated the building supplies, even taught occasional lessons about ranching and business. He set the photograph down carefully. 1898, economic depression that bankrupted 3 neighboring ranches. We survived because of your grandmother's careful bookkeeping and my conservative investments. 1900, I got elected to territorial council. She stood beside me at political functions. Not decorative wife, but genuine partner, offering smart counsel. His voice went rough. In 1890, you were born. We brought you into this house when your mother and father needed help. Your grandmother loved you fierce and complete, taught you to read, sang you songs, made you feel safe when the world felt big and scary. Daniel returned to his chair. Then came the hardest year, early 1906, spring. Your father was working the north pasture, breaking that stallion. Big gray animal, half wild. The horse got spooked by something. Reared up. Your father tried to control it, but the horse came down wrong, kicked him in the head. The room was absolutely silent. We buried him next to those 4 babies. Your grandmother held you through the funeral, held you through the weeks after when you could not stop crying. She told you stories about your father, made sure you knew what kind of man he was, what kind of man you could become. Daniel's voice cracked. 6 months later, September 28th, 1906, your grandmother died in her sleep, 59 years old, no pain, no struggle. She simply went to sleep and did not wake up. I found her that morning, thought maybe she was sleeping late, but when I touched her hand, it was cold. William's face was wet. How do you bear it? You bear it because you must, because work continues regardless, because you have a grandson who needs you to be strong, because she would be furious if I gave up after she fought so hard to build this life with me. Daniel wiped his face roughly. Tomorrow I need to visit her grave. Have not been since the funeral. Keep putting it off. But I need to go. Need to tell her what I have been telling you. Need to close this chapter properly. Can I come with you? William asked. Daniel studied his grandson, 16 years old, lost both parents within a single year, trying to become a man too fast because circumstances demanded it. Yes, you can come. Time you learned how to grieve properly. They sat in silence for a long while. The fire burned down to embers. Outside the wind howled, winter coming on hard. Finally, William spoke. Grandpa, how do I know when I have found the right person? Daniel considered carefully. You do not know, not at first. Love is not lightning from heaven. It is a decision you make every day for years until the choosing becomes natural as breathing. But I will tell you what to look for. He counted on his fingers. 1, they make you want to be better without making you feel inadequate. 2, they show up in crisis. Easy to be good partner when life is smooth. Real partners reveal themselves when everything falls apart. 3, you respect their intelligence even when you disagree. 4, you can sit in silence together without discomfort. 5, they challenge you without belittling you. Daniel met William's eyes. Your grandmother did all that. She made me better. She showed up in every crisis. She was smart, and I learned to listen. We could sit in silence for hours. She challenged me constantly, but always with respect. That is how you know. What if I choose wrong? Then you learn and choose better next time. But son, there is no one right person. There are many people you could build good life with. Question is not, is this the one? Question is, am I willing to do the work of building partnership with this person? Marriage is work, hardest work you will ever do, but most rewarding too. Daniel stood. Now go to bed. Tomorrow will be hard. Visiting graves always is. William stood, hesitated, then crossed the room and hugged his grandfather. Daniel held him tight, this boy, who was all the family he had left. I miss her too, Grandpa, William whispered. I know, son, I know. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Daniel and William walked up the hill behind the house after breakfast. The family cemetery sat beneath a stand of pine trees Evelyn had planted herself in 1880. 7 graves, Elizabeth Hartwell, an infant daughter, 4 small graves with simple markers. Baby boy Hartwell, 3 more with dates but no names, the miscarriages that had broken his wife's heart, but not her spirit. Daniel Hartwell Jr., William's father, dead at 38. And at the end, fresh dirt still showing through the grass. Evelyn Hartwell, beloved wife and grandmother, 1801 to 1906. Daniel stood before her grave, hat in his hands. William waited respectfully behind him. The wind moved through the pines, creating a sound like whispers. "I told you I would come, Ev," Daniel said quietly. "Took me 2 months, but I am here." He paused, gathering words. "Brought William. He has been asking about us, how we met, how we knew." So I told him the truth. We were not a love story. We were a partnership that became a love story. Slow, practical, real. A branch cracked somewhere in the woods. A bird called. He needs to understand that every world is changing. Young people think love is supposed to be fireworks and passion. They do not understand that real love is choosing someone every day, even when it is hard. Respecting them even when you disagree. Standing together through loss. Daniel's voice roughened. "I miss you. House is too quiet. Nobody tells me when I am being stubborn anymore. Nobody challenges my decisions. It is too easy now and I do not like it." William stepped forward, put his hand on his grandfather's shoulder. Daniel wiped his face. "One more thing. You remember that day on the platform when I chose you and everyone thought I was crazy? You asked me once years later if I ever regretted it. I never answered directly. So here is the answer. Choosing you was the smartest decision I ever made. Everything good in my life, this ranch, the respect I earned, the man I became, it all traces back to you. So no. No regrets, not one." He placed his hand on the headstone. "Rest well, partner. I will see you soon enough." They stood in silence for several minutes. Then Daniel turned, nodded to William, and they walked back down the hill together. That evening, they sat on the porch as the sun set. Daniel in his usual chair, William in the one beside him. "You understand now," Daniel asked, "why I chose her, why it worked?" "I think so," William said. "You chose character over beauty, resilience over youth. You built on respect and honesty. The love grew from that." "Exactly. And William, when you find someone worth building a life with, remember what your grandmother and I learned. Love is not about finding perfect person. It is about becoming right person for someone else. About showing up every day and doing the work. About standing together when everything goes to hell." Daniel stood, hand on William's shoulder. "The ranch is yours someday. Not just the land and cattle, the legacy we built. Your grandmother and I, we started with nothing. 500 acres and a dream. We survived droughts and blizzards and economic crashes and personal tragedies. We built something that matters, something that will outlast us both." He looked out at the land going dark. "You will face your own crises, your own failures, your own moments of doubt. Remember that your grandmother stood on 7 platforms and kept trying. Remember that sometimes being passed over just means you are waiting for the right person to finally see you. Remember that real love takes time to build, but lasts forever once you get it right." William nodded. "I will remember, Grandpa." "Good. Now come help me feed the horses. Work continues regardless of grief or memory or how much we wish we could stop time. That is life. That is ranching. That is what your grandmother taught me every single day for 28 years. They walked to the barn together. The night settled over Triple Creek Ranch, stars beginning to show in the darkening sky. The land rolling away in all directions, testament to 2 people who had refused to quit when life got hard. Inside the barn, as they worked side by side, Daniel spoke quietly. "She was the last woman standing on that platform, William. Everyone else had been chosen. She was alone and unwanted and invisible. But I saw her strength and her resilience and her worth. And choosing her, standing beside her for 28 years, building this life with her, that made all the difference." He threw hay into the last stall. "Some men get one great love in their lifetime. I got mine. Your grandmother was mine. And son, when you find yours, you hold on tight. You work hard. You show up every day. You become the kind of person worthy of standing beside someone extraordinary." They finished the chores, walked back to the house. Inside, Daniel poured whiskey, sat in his chair. The photograph of Evelyn on the mantel caught the lamplight, and for a moment, Daniel could almost believe she was still here, still watching, still challenging him to be better. To you, Ev, he said quietly, raising his glass to the photograph. Last woman standing on that platform. Best decision I ever made. Rest well, partner. He drank, set the glass down, stared into the fire. Outside, the wind carried the scent of coming snow. Winter arriving in earnest, the cycle continuing, work and weather and the turning of seasons. Life moving forward because it had to, because stopping meant giving up, and Daniel Hartwell had learned from the finest teacher that giving up was never an option. Evelyn had stood on 7 platforms, had endured 7 rejections, had kept trying when anyone sensible would have quit. She had taught him that resilience mattered more than beauty. That partnership built on respect lasted longer than romance built on passion. That love was not a lightning strike, but a daily choice made over and over until it became as natural as breathing. She had taught him how to love, how to grieve, how to stand firm when everything fell apart, how to build something that would outlast them both. And now, sitting alone in the house they had filled with 28 years of shared life, Daniel understood the final lesson, the one she could only teach by leaving. That grief was the price of loving deeply. That loneliness was the cost of building something real with another person. That he would carry this pain until his own grave opened, because that pain was proof of what they had built together. He would rather feel this ache and know he had spent 28 years with a remarkable woman than feel nothing and have nothing worth mourning. That was the last lesson, the hardest one, the one that mattered most. Daniel closed his eyes. Let the firelight play across his weathered face. Remembered a September afternoon 28 years ago when he rode into Sterling Ridge covered in mud and made a choice that changed everything. 7 rejections had not broken her. 7 platforms could not make her quit. She had stood alone and unwanted and kept her chin up and her spine straight. And he had seen her, really seen her. Not what she lacked, but what she carried. Strength forged in failure. Character built from surviving what should have destroyed her. The kind of resilience you could build a life on. He had been right to choose her. Right to stand beside her through decades of hard seasons. Right to love her even though loving meant one day losing her. She had been worth it. Worth every moment. Worth the grief he carried now like stones in his chest. Worth remembering until his last breath. The last woman standing. The one everyone else overlooked. The one who became everything. Daniel opened his eyes, added wood to the fire, settled deeper into his chair. Tomorrow he would wake early, feed the stock, check the fences, teach William how to manage the books. Work would continue because work always continued. That was the way of things, the way Evelyn had taught him. But tonight he would sit with his memories and his whiskey and the ghost of a woman who had stood on 7 platforms and refused to quit, who had taken his hand when he offered partnership and built something that would outlast them both. Tonight he would remember. Tomorrow he would work, and someday when his own time came, he would rest beside her on that hill beneath the pines she had planted. Partner, wife, the finest thing that ever happened to him. Worth choosing, worth keeping, worth mourning properly when she was gone. The fire crackled, the house settled. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall soft and silent, while covering the land in white. The cycle continuing, the seasons turning, life moving forward into whatever came next. Daniel Hartwell sat alone and remembered, and that was enough.